Hey everyone, welcome to the Process Mapping Masterclass episode 3 today. I'm your host, Meherban. Today I have a pleasure of having a co-host with me, Chanel. So Chanel, before I start, maybe I'll just pass it to you to do an introduction about yourself and your interest in process.
Thank you, Mehbab. So, my name is Chanel. I'm from the beautiful islands of Fiji here in the South Pacific, currently sunny. Um, I was born in the second largest island, Lambasa. I've been process mapping for the past 18 years, but no matter how long you're in the business of process mapping, there's always something new to learn when it comes to um, documenting or mapping your processes. And it's because of this journey that I've been on with regards to this particular skill set that's driven my passion towards the BPM, um, should I say, side of life. So I'm glad to have met people like Meherban to walk me through some of the opportunities and challenges that I have been facing in my line of business, and also looking forward to link up with um, the fellow classmates on during this masterclass. So that's me. I'm going to hand that back over to Meherban to carry on the class.
Thanks, Chanel. And before I forget to mention, just today's class is thanks to an idea that Chanel came up with. So if you guys like what I'm about to present, you should be thanking Chanel really. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Meherban Farouk, and I started BPS Partners in 2017, where essentially we help our clients implement business process management. And again, for those of you who've been attending the sessions, are beginning to learn a little bit more about what it is and the importance of, pretty much documenting business processes. It's not just about documenting a business process. It's about standardizing, streamlining, improving, setting up the governance structure, identifying who's the process owner, who's accountable to drive that across the business, the end-to-end process across the business, who's their BPM champion, essentially who's their subject matter expert, who can help them document the flow, and keep it updated. And it's not just about documenting and streamlining and improving, but also I had a session I think it was last month, on process risk and control assessment. And when I say controls and risk, it's not just about SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, or financial controls. It's about any risk that the process can face, right? From reputational to customer to vendor, supply chain, and of course financial, logistics, whatever. So and I'm not going to repeat all what I explained in the February masterclass, but I would suggest you go through that and understand how you identify process risks at the process levels in order to identify the right key controls and place them on your process map. So at a high level, for those who ask me what I do, essentially I help companies, or I empower companies to align their business processes with their strategy and desired culture. I mean, that's really what I do at a high level, right, Shannon? I mean, that's the best way I can
Yeah.
explain. And notice I use the word desired culture, not actual culture, because your actual culture, I'm just saying, if it's chaotic or confusing or not transparent, and if the desired culture you want to create in your organization based on your core values, right, based on your strategy, your vision, your purpose, something I covered in the January masterclass, is
Mm.
transparency and openness and improvement culture, then those are the things you need to identify as part of that you have identified as part of your strategic objectives. When you do your process risk and control assessment, those are the process objectives. Because end of the day, when I say business process, documenting business process, it's about teaching the organization how to perform work, and how you perform work, especially on your core processes, should be aligned to your strategic objectives. Chanel, what do you think about that? Before even I go further, like your thoughts on that?
No, that's absolutely correct. From my side, like with my experience, I've been in companies who hire somebody in my field to just come and document a process and make sure that everything's on paper. But the reality is, when you're documenting processes, it really has to match up with how the people will, approach um, what you're identifying as a risk, or how you can identify improvements. It's not just about putting things on paper, it's about executing at the end of the day for consistency. So you're absolutely right. Um, it's working with a desired approach to setting the, a benchmark for your culture in the company to accept that part of the business.
Exactly. Thanks, Jack. And to that point, again, some thoughts are coming to mind. And that's why change management is so important, right? It's one thing that you documented a process or a bunch of processes, right, and put it on your company's intranet site. But if you haven't had a proper change, if you don't have a proper leader, if you don't have an executive leader, and I'm saying a leader, I mean like at a C-suite level, I mean, preferably a CEO, of course, but someone at a CEO level or CFO or CIO level, somebody who really buys into having processes streamlined and making it as part of your onboarding, like as soon as the employee starts, or as part of your lunch and learn sessions, or as part of your annual performance reviews. Like that is the kind of leadership, right, that allows you to streamline business processes and build a process improvement culture in the organization. So I want to kind of put it up front out there because, I meet some people, Chanel, and I'm just being completely candid right now, where they get so caught up in the weeds, right, of documenting a business process that they forget why they're doing it in the first place. And that's the
correct,
message we want to make sure it's kind of out there. And okay, so that's kind of what we do, and that's what you can expect to learn in these classes. Essentially, and with that, again, who can benefit from these classes? Again, irrespective of your title, C-suite, shop floor, accountant, logistics, whoever, as long as you have a passion for process, as long as you want to improve your process, whatever we kind of share in these classes, you'll find beneficial. So I want to get to back to the basics kind of in this session. So in January, we did a BPM Essentials class where, pretty much what I said earlier, we went through as to how it's not just about people, process, and technology. And don't take me wrong, there's a lot about people, process, technology when it comes to, your day-to-day business or implementing a solution or whatnot. But it's a little bit beyond that. It's more about connecting your processes with people, process, technology, risks, and controls, and also what I call abstract values, right? Your core values in the organization, your culture, your desired culture, your vision, your purpose, your strategy. So that kind of is where you kind of should keep in mind, or those guiding principles you keep in mind when I talk about BPM Essentials. That's what we covered in January. In February's class, we covered process risk and performance management, where I dived in deeper, explaining a structured approach, not just off the seat of your pants in a BPM process documenting workshop to come up with controls, but a proper structured approach based on COSO ERM framework. And again, that's covered in February. Chanel, did you get a chance to go to that session?
Yes, yet? I absolutely did, and was quite excited about because here in Fiji we have very limited influence over, how can I say, how I mentioned to you earlier that in terms of skill set building within this space, it's very limited. At first, the schools here, or they don't really teach that particular skill set. So you bringing that framework into play makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that that's pretty much how I've built over the years the approach towards process mapping and factoring in all those aspects. And I hope everybody else in the class today actually takes a lot of home on that as well.
Thanks. And again, I can't take the credit of doing this. Like, as I said, when I was in Enbridge in 2005 or 6, this is something that the team developed and I picked up from there. And since the last 20 years, I've been applying it and I'll tell you that when I go to clients, there are some clients, everybody kind of likes it. Of course, everybody wants to improve their processes, document it, and identify key controls, but not everybody has the time, right, to assign their best resource, best subject matter expert, not just to document, but to document the risks and controls. But those who do definitely come out, better off, in my humble opinion, at least.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, 10 out of 10 times, I don't care how much work you've done in the past in documenting risks and controls, but if you go through that structured approach that I've explained in February, 10 out of 10 times there will be an aha moment on the team where somebody will look it up and say, my God, I never thought that there was a missing risk, or we just identified missing key control, because it's a structured framework and it's built on the COSO ERM framework. So anyway, that's what we did in February. So today, what I want to do is pretty much go back to the basics and if you're stuck on an ERP project or a department initiative where you want to document a process map in Visio and you just are struggling, today's class hopefully will be beneficial. Okay, so with that, Chanel, you can see my word here.
I can see that on the presentation. Yeah.
Thanks. So what I did as part of the invite, this is the basic accounts payable process. I am a finance guy end of the day. So I wrote up a pretty simple accounts payable process, and let's not get caught up in I might have made some mistakes in the steps, and I kept it very simple. But the whole idea is to show you in real time how I would take this flow, the step, the explanation, the control, and transfer it in real time into Visio. So that's what I'm about to do. As part of that, you learn a lot, not just Visio, but the technique. So typically, for those of you who don't use Notepad, I would encourage you to use Notepad. Notepad has a very excellent feature of killing formatting, whether it's in Excel or Word. So let me get started. So I have the Word document here. I have my Visio template here. And again, I've shown in some of my prior classes how you can create a template from scratch, from a blank Visio. If you need to learn that, I can teach it again. But essentially, this is the template I use at all my clients. And again, I change it according to the needs, of course. If they need to see a document, I'll create a document. If they need to see double lines, I'll do double lines. I do not use the BPMN symbols. It's very complicated. And the last thing you want to do is to teach an executive or even the new rookie.
Yeah.
Chanel, what are your thoughts on, be candid, on BPMN?
It's a great skill to know, but when you're actually in the position of, in my experience, trying to explain process flows to C-suite level executives, it becomes a bit confusing for them. I think the straightforward process mapping on Visio it makes a huge difference in getting them to understand the BPMN function. I believe it's a good skill set for you to know, especially when it comes to the technical system enhancements and RPs when you're working with developers and so forth. But the Visio platform, I believe, this is just great on its own when you're trying to influence basically not just C-suite, like even down to operator level. Makes a huge difference in them understanding the flow.
Thanks, and I'm glad you brought this up. So BPMN, for those of you who don't know, those are pretty much, I don't know, a list of 40, 50, or 60 symbols created by a bunch of IT people, which is excellent if you're an IT project and you're working in an IT team, and because that's the language of, I don't want to say language of code, but those are signs that are very helpful for them to learn, the flow of properly. But in all my instances, as Chanel said, working with the C-suite or the shop floor or the office stuff, simple, less is more, less is more. So these simple,
absolutely
right words. Okay. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new page. First of all, I'm just going to keep my original template. I'm going to right click and I'm going to start talking. So Chanel, what I need you to do is if I'm going too fast or if I'm saying things that don't make sense or you want to pause and ask a question, feel free. If people write something in the chat, I won't have my eye on the chat, so take a look at the chat. But I'll speak as I'm doing, so people understand what I'm doing. And again, this video is being recorded. It'll be on YouTube, so you can go over it later and figure it out. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if you want to duplicate a page, you just right click there, duplicate, right, just like that is duplicated. I already have a background set up, so the title, the logo, the stuff like that is there. So whenever I duplicate, or if I insert a new page, so if you want to insert a completely brand new page, just like that, I'll call it new as an example with the foreground, and see the background selected already, the background that I have, right? You click OK, it created a blank page for me. And maybe that's where I'll start. Okay, so I'm gonna delete the old page. That's how you delete what you don't want, of course, just like Excel sheets, right? So I've got a new page. I'm gonna borrow just one step from here. I'm gonna right click, copy it, and put it on the new, right? I'm gonna expand this with my mouse. Now you can expand it from down here, plus, minus, like that. By the way, the features down here are also very helpful. You see the slideshow. So if you click on the slideshow, it's just like PowerPoint slideshow. And then, by your cursor down, up, you can just, this is what I love about Visio. And when you do the slideshow, it will not show the background page. Again, just to be clear. So when you do the slideshow, it's not going to show you the background. You'll just go to the last page, the last active page, which is controls right there. Okay, so what I would typically do is kind of, just copy a box there, expand it a little bit like that, and then copy a few more just like that, select it, and copy it. I'm dragging and copying it. You can do, Control C, Control V. I'm just lining up a few steps. That's all I'm doing. The next thing I'm doing is I'm going into Word. I'm going to copy all of this just like that, right? Copy, and I'm going to open up a blank notepad just like that, and I'm going to paste it there, right? Now I'm going to keep my notepad on the side. I'm going to just close the Word down. I'm going to, since I've got a bigger screen here, I'm going to literally copy paste, right? And once again, this is not about the accounts payable process. It's more about showing you how to use Visio. I'm going to copy steps just like that, step 1, 2, 3. So just bear with me there as I do. So as I was typing this out, you notice I've got step numbers. I've got the stakeholder, whether it's business or accounts payable. You'll see that in the final version, of course, I'll take off the step 4, step 1, step 2. I'll also take out the stakeholder name or role, whether vendor or accounts payable, because you want few words, right, in the step itself. And the way I write the step is the verb noun format. The verb noun format, which is in this case, let's say submit invoice to AP, submit invoice to AP, or record goods receipt, stuff like that. So you'll see as I go through. So for now, I'm just kind of simply copying it, from Notepad to in the sequence. So I have some stuff lined up. And the whole idea of this session is to teach you how to use Visio. So there you go. So I've got my 10 steps lined up. Okay. So now that I have my 10 steps lined up, I'm going to open this up again. This fit to page is a great feature, right? Because if I'm too large somewhere, I just want to take a holistic view. Another thing you should know, and this is something that frustrated me in Visio 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I wasn't very good at this. So if you have a step that's kind of lined up here as an example, you see what it just did? So now it thinks you want 2 pages, right? So if you do like a show like this, it's going to show you 2 pages. And I'm telling you, in 50% of the cases, when I go to new clients, they've got it all over the place. They have it like this, they have it like this, they have it like this, and then they're complaining they don't like Visio, quite frankly. If you don't know how to use a tool, you've got to learn how to use the tool. This is not good. So notice if I just delete this, delete this, delete this, and now do fit to page or a slideshow, it'll just come nicely, right? So make sure you got your pages aligned. Okay, so now I'm going to expand this a little bit so I can see it better. I'm going to take this extra steps out. So here's what I'm trying to observe. In this, how many stakeholders are there? So I can see clearly business, accounts payable, and vendor. There are three stakeholders, right? So I can borrow from my own template, or I will show you how to create it. So when you're creating a swim lane role, you kind of go from this top feature here, not on the left. You select square or rectangle, you fill it up. I mean, again, these are my choices. You can do differently. I select the second shade of gray, so it stands out a little bit. I make it bold. I make it like 14 fonts. Now, remember, so see, it's still got in the selection, it still thinks I want to draw something. So if I want to type here, and it'll keep creating a step. So the most important thing in Visio is once you select an object, you got to go back to the pointer tool. Once again, I'll say it slowly. Once you select an object, whatever connector, this step, whatever, you got to keep going back on the pointer tool and select. So then you can select and move things, or you can write in it. And if you're not used to that, initially you might find it a bit frustrating. Once you get used to it, it's second nature to you. Just like, you drive a car, you accelerate, you brake, you move the gear. It's a second nature to you. So what I do is I select this and I go down there, and I've gotten used to this. My height is normally 0.3. The length, of course, depends on the length of the, the swim lane. So here I'll select 3 of them like this. I'll copy it. I'll type business here. I'll type vendor here, right? And I'll type accounts payable analyst here, right? Okay, so now I'm gonna just kind of condense it a little bit more. I'm just gonna move. So this is again a good feature. If you're not comfortable, you can use the angle degree. I just got used to it, so I'm just gonna turn it around like that. I'm gonna line the first one there. I'm gonna line the second one there, and I'm gonna line up the third one there. And notice how it lines up nicely with legend, because my legend also is 0.3. So if you go on here, you see it's 0.3. just minor points. And what I mean by that is if your was not 0.3, see, it looks a little ugly. You see what it just did? It looks a little ugly. So if these are minor details, I'm just sharing with you. Now I know there's a the idea is not just to make the map look pretty, but if you make the map look pretty, when the C-suite it's just like a PowerPoint slide, right? It's not about impressing anybody. It's about when the C-suite looks at a well-designed process map, they get it. It's straightforward. And same for the, somebody in the shop floor or the new guy or gal coming in. When they look at the process maps that's well designed, that looks good to the eyes, they appreciate the beauty of it and they pick up the keywords faster. That's the only reason why. It makes sense, right?
Absolutely correct. I think when you're looking at process mapping in general, when you're trying to learn it, learning Visio is just one little part of the puzzle. The part that's going to make sense is you allowing to have that information flow seamlessly on the piece of paper, so it makes sense to whoever's reading. That's the key one. I think
what you said,
a lot of people with OCD might love that, putting things in order. I think that I love that part of it.
No, and you make a good point. I mean, I don't have OCD, but I've got to kind of remind myself, like, stop, right? Like, because if I go too deep into making perfection minor points, especially early, that's a good tip. So when you're documenting the process, what I've learned is don't do certain things up front because the process will keep changing, if that makes sense, like step numbers. So perfect example I'll give you is the step numbers, like this one. Right, these step numbers up top. These I never put in the very beginning. These are put right at the end. After all the subject matter expert workshops are done, even after the final VP workshops are done, I tell them, don't worry about the steps. I'll put it at the end because the steps keep changing. And in this one, it's like a few steps. In some of my process maps, it's like 30 steps. And so if I'm changing step, if I added a step between 1.4 and 1.5, there you go. I'm gonna spend another 10 minutes. In my case, 10 minutes. In your case, half an hour. Right? Because still need it. So keep those things in mind. Anyway, so the way I would do this, because if I see the steps is business first, then kind of vendor, then accounts payable comes in, then vendor. So I would flip it a little bit. And this is back to again, Chanel's point. Like once you get good at this, you realize this becomes second nature to you, right? Which one kind of goes first and what looks good to the eyes. So there you go. There's the business. I'll move these things on the side a little bit, just like that. Just like that. EP is right there somewhere. Vendor is down here, right? Okay, then accounts payable is back here. No, not this one, sorry. Number 6, business is back to the business. Okay, so now I'm going to start lining it up a little bit better as I can start seeing it visually. I'm going to put business right there, analyst right there, vendor right there. I'm going to give it back something like this. 7, this is back to the vendor, okay. 8, back to the analyst. 9 and 10. Okay, then I'll take a little, not this one, for the start and end. I like it 0.3 in height and 0.7 in width. It just kind of goes nicely. I'll borrow the formatting from here. This is a format painter tool, by the way, if you guys don't know. In Excel and Word, PowerPoint, Visio, it's all the same format painter. So I'll undo it. If you just want to select a box or step or object, whatever, do format painter and click the one you want. It just format paints it. These steps, typically, if you got so much space, I would keep it to 12 fonts. 12 is good enough. The standard that comes with Visio is the default when you start is 8 fonts. 8 is too small. 12 is a decent size. And then I'll type start here, and then I'll copy paste this, and I'll do end there. I'll stick it somewhere down here. I'll stick this one somewhere up here. The other thing I do, again, there's enough space right now, but there are times when I don't have space. I'll start, I'll flip the start. It just gives extra space. And trust me when I say this, Sharon, I don't know if you've experienced, but there are times when I'm like dying for like just half an inch, right, on the map. So
yep, absolutely.
Okay, just showing you some stuff. Okay, so now I'm gonna line these things up. Now that I've lined these stuff up, it's a good time for me to add a line. The way to add a line is go up in this object here, select that line there, basically just draw a line just like that. And once I've drawn it, I'm gonna copy paste it just like that. I'm eyeballing these things right now. I'm not kind of worried about perfection at this stage. Okay, so now I'm beginning to see that there's a step 1, step 2, step 3, 4, and maybe what I'll do is I'll start connecting them as well. So I start seeing it visually, just like that, 4, 5. I would go probably like this, like that, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and N, right? Now, okay, so I've got the flow. Okay, that's fine. But you don't want to write. So now I'm going to start removing the steps. Now remember, for this class purposes, I wrote a Word document with step 1, starting business identifiers. In the workshop, I would never write step 1, step 2. And if I have a few minutes at the end, I'll show you how to do it in real time in the workshop, right? But this was just to save time. Now, since it's the business lane, you don't need to repeat the word business because it's in the business lane. The other thing, at the risk of repeating myself many times, you want to have few words in the box. The more words you have, the more busy the map looks, the more the C-suite or the new rookie or the guy in the lunch and learn has to read, right?
Yeah.
Keep it specific and try the verb noun format. So in this case, identifies need to buy part or service. Step 2, take out the word business, obtains 3 quotes and finalizes vendor. Step 3, again, take out the word, so creates. The other thing I will normally do is I will hit an enter here, so the words create stands out. Now, I won't do it all the time, but just saying. Number 4, AP analyst, I'll take that out since it's an AP analyst lane, creates purchase order. Down here, I'll say vendor supplies, simple. Step 6, I'll say business records. Again, it's in the business lane, so it's right there. Down here, vendor submits, so submit invoice to AP, perform 3-way match. So here, there needs to be a
I have a
decision.
question on the chat here from, forgive me, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It's Somdeb. So the question is, how can I show multiple start points for a process?
Excellent question. Multiple start. Excellent question. Thank you for asking that question. So let's say there is another step here, right? And I'll make it more another step here. I'll just call it another start point, whatever the step is, right? That's what he's asking, right? And I'll just copy it here. So what I would typically do is just one start and connect it like this. Right? That's it. Right now, if it's 3 like this, I prefer to have it in the center like that. Again, this is visual aesthetics, right? I will do something like this. Right? And there can also be an instance, since you asked that question, Somdeb, and I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. There might be an instance where it's coming from another process. So now start thinking an ERP implementation, a business transformation, an M&A, right? A business process management initiative, where you're not documenting one process map, you're documenting all the process maps of the company. So end of the day, they all kind of talk to, they do, right? They talk to each other.
Yeah.
So let's say there's and this is why I have, so if you look at my legend, the way I create my legend is there's a start, there's a current process step. This is what I'm doing in white. Any change, kind of a different color, light yellow decision, but I have this one preceding a subsequent process step. So, and you can have it as a square, you can have it as a double line, you can have it as a circle. Remember, these are not Meherban Farouk's BPMN. You can use it the way you want it. This is how I do it. Some clients prefer, a circle or square, whatever. So there might be an instance where, as an example, it's not coming from here. I'm going to purposely change it just to make the point. I'm going to switch it there. And I would add another step, and it's coming from process X, whatever that process X is, right? And I'm gonna use, in my case, I'll use the same kind of color like that, and I'll show it's connecting like that. So you see what I've just done? So, right, Somdeb, I hope this kind of answers your question. I'm just kind of putting lines together to show you visually what I've done. So in cases where there is, good, I'm glad you liked it. So in case there is more than one start point, that's what you would do. What I put process X, this could also be a start point, right? Try and not cross over lines. So let's say this was not a process X, but a start. I would not do something like this. I would, I can probably, but it's a bit ugly, if that makes sense to you, right? So in that case, those 3 I would connect there, but this one, I would say it's a difference. Does it make sense? Sure. Yeah. It's more visual. It's again what makes sense. Okay. Keep asking the questions. I love the questions. So I'm going to take these things off. Take this off, take this off, take this line off, put this back there. And okay. So I would take the step off again, just to kind of line these things up. Again, I'm not trying to teach you the accounts payable process. So if there are any errors here, I don't really care. I'm going to show you Visio. So another thing I would add here is a three-way match as an example. So this step says perform three-way match in SAP. Okay, so then did it match? Yes or no? Right. So in that case, again, when you add try and few words, right? Take the format painter, format this right there. So in this case, I would take these three. I would line them up nicely. So width probably 1 is good, and height 1 is also good here, like that, just like that. See what I did, Chanel? I selected 3 and save time. Now, how I used to do it 10 years ago? 10 years ago, I used to do this by hand. This is what I used to do. Can you imagine how much time I used to waste? You see where I'm going with this? These minor tips, they save a lot of time and the value of anyway. So what I would do is I'll do a three-way match here. Again, I can expand it like this, but if I want it to be really nice, I can say width 1 and 1 like that. And the width maybe 1.2 is a little better, stuff like that. Okay, so now I would say that I'll connect it like this. If it's a three-way match, yes, then go and approve the invoice. Yes. If it's not a three-way match, then ask the business to record the goods, right? So in that case, I would move it down. Since I'm doing it, I might as well align it together like that, move it down, right? And I would take another step, make it a little broader and say, ask, request business to record goods receipt. In SAP, right? That's what I would do. Okay, so in that case, again, if it's 3, and I'm going into details, but I hope this is helping. So for 3 lines, I prefer height is 0.7. It makes sense. For 2 lines, 0.5 makes sense. But again, this is just me. You can develop your own stuff over time. So in this case, if it's not a three-way match, then it's a no, and then it kind of loops back right there. Okay, so now that I have the basic outline ready, right? Now I need to make it like spread on the flow, right? So what I'm going to do is I see that on vendors there's only 2 steps, so I'm going to move this a little bit down, not too down because there's too much space. I'm going to move it a little bit down. I'm going to move the line a little bit down, just like that. On this one, I'm going to move it a little bit down like this. I'm going to push this up a little bit more. I'm going to take these and take this and line it together and see how it looks. This feature, by the way, align is a really great feature. Top, left, right, position. This is a really nice feature. So then I would push this right at the end, just like this a little bit more, right? And then I would select just these 4, and I would say position, distribute horizontally. So you see what it's doing? It's distributing horizontally. So now I'll take this one and line it up with that one and say center. And then I would say there's enough space still. So I would just move it a little bit closer. I would move this a little bit down, just like that. I would move this a little bit down. Then I would take these and line them up like this. Middle. I would do that like that, and then line it up like this. Right, I think I'm good. So now I'm going to expand. This is, by the way, a great feature. Your mouse roller and control. Right now, I can do it from here also, but I'm just used to this plus and minus. But I'm just used to. And the other thing is, if it's just like this, let's say I want to focus in on this vendor and this line. So see, wherever I put my mouse, and scroll, it zooms that area, if that makes sense, right? So I'm going to zoom in on this particular area. See, that becomes center of the page, like that. So now that I have the line here, I'm doing like this, and I can pull this one down just like that. And this one just like that, and go back up here and zoom in and pull this one just like that. And if I, fit to page and I see my view, at least my lines are lined up nicely, right? Nope, it's not. See that? See that? Vendor is not lined up nicely. So now what I will do, just saying, you don't want something like that left on your flow. And line up nicely. Okay. Fit to page. Yeah, it looks good enough. And this needs to be aligned. So overall, what I look for is that, no crooked lines, the flow makes sense. And most importantly, and I find this a lot at my clients when I look at the process maps, there are some steps where it's not connected. So the mistakes I find, for instance, um, how should I say? This one, there's no line, there's nothing going. Or I will find that there is a step like this, as an example. There's a step, I'll just call it step X, right? There's a step that's connected without a start or without a preceding, right? There's a step that's connected without a connection. I picked that up you cannot have any step on the flow without a preceding or a subsequent. Does that make sense, Shannon? Because otherwise it's hanging in the air. Like, where is it coming from? Where is it going
It
to?
absolutely does. Yeah. So, Meherban, I also have a question for, is it Janine? How can I show a process with multiple if/then options?
Multiple if then swap options. So multiple if. Okay. I think I understand the question. That's a great question, by the way. I'll open up a new one for this. Janine, that's a great question you just asked. And I've figured out how to do it over the years. So what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna create a step. And from this step, or even from the start at times, right? Even from the start at times, the process starts and says option 1. And Janine, correct me if I'm wrong. And if you want to come online and I can unmute you so we can have a good chat. So the process might just start by saying, do you have this? It says no. Then this, no. Then this, no. Then this, no. Then this. Does it make sense? I think that's what she's asking. If then, right? So in that case, what I do is something like I would start with the decision box right away. And I would make decision boxes just like that. Right? And so what will happen is, right? You will ask the question here. Whatever the question is, and if Janine can help me, she's typing something, a specific example, it will go like this. Typically, the way it goes is like this for me. Right?
Yeah.
Here, in this one, it'll be a yes. I'll show you in a second. So here.
Janine mentions most of the processes start in one step, but then turn into if/then.
Sure. So if there's a specific example, I can be more particular. But if I understand a question correctly, there are process maps that start like this. There's a step, whatever step, and then it goes into a question, right? And it says, so if this is yes, this option, then yes, go do this, right? And then go do this. And of course, keep doing something, right? Keep doing something, you know what I'm saying? But if no, then you jump here. If yes, then jump there. If no, then jump there. Does that make sense? And then this is the last step. I mean, ultimately it ends somewhere. If no, then that's your final thing. There's another option left. So, Sharon, does that make sense to you?
Yep. Janine says thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I'll be completely candid. Before I kind of figured it out, and I know it seems common sense, but I didn't understand how to do this 10 years ago, 15 years ago. My process map was very confusing. But once you understand, the key here is to ask the right. So first of all, before you even go on the process, ask your subject matter expert in the workshop to explain to you. At times, they're also very confused. You'll find they're also very confused. So your job, whether it's on the whiteboard or Visio, try and figure out what are those sequential questions and steps, and then map it out like this. Okay, so I'll go back to the flow. So I got the flow defined. So the next thing we want to do is explanations, right? Again, I'm being mindful of time. We have about 15-20 minutes. So in the explanations, again, this is my template. What I typically do is I start with lines around it because I want to see, this is very important. I start with lines around it because I want to see. There's just some stuff I wrote down. So, I'm going to just delete it very quickly. right? Like that. And I'm going to go back to my notepad right there. And again, this is an example. So now that you have the explanation, and in my case, the explanations are not this small. At the same time, they're not an entire page, but they are really like bullet. I've shown you some of my samples before, and I can show it again. But this was just an example. So I would write my explanation here. In some cases, it will say, it'll give you roles, titles. It might these are engineering projects or regulatory or whatever. It will refer to the law or the section code. I avoid writing the whole code in there. I might give cross-reference to a SOP manual or a clause or a legal contract. In some cases where the client wants to write, I would write it. But just to give an example, right, it'll be something like this. Now, I'm not going to waste time, copy paste each and every item here, but you get the idea. Now, again, what I also do, because this turned into bold, certain words, because it can be too verbose at times, right? So imagine, as an example, this explanation number 2 is a little lengthy, as an example, right? I've got this, some verbiage repeated a few times. Another trick I should show you, by the way, if you don't know. So, I copy paste. Some people would hit an enter here, right? You can enter the show it separate. I prefer not hitting enter. I prefer using this paragraph feature, which is the same as Excel, same as Word, same as PowerPoint, if you didn't know. So you click on paragraph and you go on after and you do 6 or 12 after, right? And apply, and it's nice and neat. And if you don't like this, then go back and do 12. Okay, now
just to check back and reflect on the process with multiple if, and then there's a example submitted by RG here. It's example checkout process, customer login using existing account, yes or no, creates an account, yes or no, checkout as guest.
Yeah. So same thing, right? Exactly. So customer login using existing account. So the example here would be use, and I'm glad you wrote that, use existing account, question mark, right? Use existing account, yes or no. Then create an account. So I'm guessing if it's no, then create an account. Help me here, Chanel. If it's no, then create a new account. I guess in this case, right?
Yes or no, yeah.
No. And I don't know, there's more, but if there's more, it'll keep going like that. Yeah. RD, does that help? Right? But I'm glad whoever asked this question, I'm glad you asked that question, because that's a nuance you need to learn. So what I'm showing here again is how to use paragraph features. The other thing I want to show you, for instance, you see how this is pretty much to the left and there's a little bit on the right here. There'll be times in the process map or explanations where you want the left margins to be, so, and the other thing I'll show you is, you see how I stop a line? So let me show you these formatting features. So of course, if you do center, it's like that, or center line like that. But there are times where you just want it a little bit indented on the right. So you go on the paragraph. What I showed you before was paragraph. Now you go on text block. You go on text block. And in text block, see the margins, top, left, right. This is the margin settings. So I'm going to put this on the side. Let's say I wanted a little bit more from the left. So from the left, rather than to do 10, 15 points, right? 14. But if you're doing it the same, then do it on the right as well. So it's kind of balanced and you apply it. You see what just happened? And this comes in very handy on the process, more than the expression on the process map, because on the process map, there'll be times, and I'm going to use just a new so I don't mess it up. On the process map, there are times where you are mapping a process like this, right? In a step, and then it goes into a bunch of steps that you want to show within a big box, if that makes sense, right? So in that case, you might put little steps in there, right? And then write something here as a heading, if that makes sense, right? And let's say like this. It's like something like this, right? So now you want it up top, of course. So you'll go top, but it's too much at the top. You see what I'm saying? It's not looking cool. So what you want to do is you want to go in paragraph. You want to do from the top. You want to say, give me 20 points as an example, right? That's too much. So 10 points as an example, right? And then if the font size is, big, you might want to say that back here from the in the text block, from the left, give me 10, and from the right, give me 10. So these are just formatting stuff, if that helps, but it helps you make it a little bit more aesthetically make sense, right? Stuff like that.
Meherban, I also have two questions from Mark. Question one is, as a general rule, would we always look to keep internal organization roles, for example, business and AP analyst, next to each other as lanes, as you have? And would we ever add high-level lanes to show, for example, the same department? That's question one.
So can I try and answer? That's a great question. So if I go back on the process map, I like your thinking there, what you're saying, that would you keep like the business, accounts payable, logistics, administration, finance, like in the first lane and keep the vendor external outside or the customer outside? Preferably yes, because visually but there are times, so my preference is where there are times where if you have it that way, you'll be crossing too many lines. I'll just pause and let you reflect there, Mark. If you keep it that way, there are times you'll be crossing too many lines because that accounts payable guy or gal is going too many times the vendor, and then there'll be certain shared responsibilities between the vendor and the business and the accounts payable. So if it's, in between those, there are 3 more lanes, it's difficult to map it. So as a general rule, what you said makes sense, but more times than not, especially for a complex process that doesn't have just few steps, so I put it up and then I see visually what's going on, right? And the way I overcome not crossing lines is I would create these little on-page connectors, right? So I would kind of say like this, right? I would color it in black so it really stands out. I would put the font a little better. I would put it white, of course, and I would say A as an example, right? Make it bold, make it a little bigger maybe, right? And I will say, it's coming, as an example, something like that. So I'll put the on-page connector and I'll say, this is going to there. To avoid crossing over the lines, if you want to stick to your internal departments in the first and vendor and customer. That's a good question. I hope that helps, Mark. There's a second question.
There's a second question to that would be, would we ever look to document parts that are simply information information flow as a dashed line, for example, between the activities like create, purchase, and record goods?
Dash line, yes. There are times where I would do, but that's very occasional. In most cases, I would have a solid line, but there are times where I would have a dashed line, and in that case, I would say something like, as an example like this, whatever that is. And in that case, I would, depends. It all depends on what am I honestly feeling at that point in time. More times than not, I will tell the clients I'm an artist. I mean, this is art for me, right? So whatever makes sense for me to help the client or the audience really understand. So I would not just dash the line, but I would also dash the box. So I would dash it like this. I would use stronger lines so it stands out as a dash. I would connect it, let's say, to this step, right? But then if I'm doing that, I would remove the arrow, if that makes sense. I don't want the arrow in some cases. I mean, you cannot, it's a personal choice, but I think this is what you're asking. I would do that, yes.
Awesome, thanks, Meherban. There's also another question from Somdab. It's, in addition to executive buy-in, how can I help embed adoption of Visio in the organization?
So again, I'm going to give you very candid answers from my experience, right? You need to have an executive bought into this, because if you are working at a junior level, it's a good initiative, but you won't get too far. Again, if you're documenting your accounts payable process or your regulatory process or your sure, absolutely yes. And you can, once you're done, you can impress your boss, get it to them and to the leadership. But if you're trying to implement business process management or the process improvement documentation standard culture across the organization or even across a division or a business unit, you need to have a leadership. And the reason you need a leadership support, of course, is because you need other people to meet you, right, Chanel? It's very
Yeah,
difficult to,
absolutely.
I still have to find a CFO, CIO, or CEO, anybody in the leadership who says, no, I don't like business processes. I don't want this. I don't want to improve our processes. Everybody says yes. Everybody says yes. But when I say, okay, then you need to give me people that I can work with, the subject matter knowledge, that's when the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
So
aside from the resources, it's the actual technical technology as well that they sort of like pause a bit on until it makes sense for them. Bottom line. There's also a second part to that question, Meherban, and with reference to what you highlighted with on identifying process owners. So the question also from Samdab was, what support would a process owner need to be accountable to a process, and should the actors in the process report to the process owner?
beautiful, excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that. So what I've learned from painful experience is if you don't have a process owner, first of all, at a leadership level, and again, this goes against a little bit of what Lean Six Sigma is, and I'm not discounting that approach where the process owner should be at the work level, like a supervisor, not a very junior, but a supervisor level. But the kind of work that we mostly do on BPM side across the process owner has to be a leadership, preferably like a VP, level or senior director level, because they can influence the process, right? Because of, and when I talk process, I'm not just talking a simple process, I'm talking end-to-end processes. And I say influence, I mean, when a process needs to change, there's change management. At times you might need to buy something, so they need to have a budget for it. The budget may not be in their department, the budget might be in another department that is part of the process. Makes sense? So if they're not senior enough, then there's no influence and the process will never change. And if they're not senior enough, they're not familiar with the regulations that are changing. There are external stuff that's impact the internal strategy of the company. So that's why you need a senior leader to lead the process. But the question is not that. The question is, how can we support the senior leader, the process owner, to be accountable for the process? So the way you do that is form a process council. Now I call it process council, you can call it process governance, you can call it process board, whatever you want to call it. So very simple. When I go and organize, that's one of the first things that I do, right? I share with them the framework, the process documentation framework, the process risk and assessment control framework. I will start documenting one or two, but more than that, I will say, let's step back before we dive in the weeds. I'm not sure if I covered this before, Chanel, but keep me honest here. One of the first things I will do is I will create an inventory log with them, a process inventory log with them. And believe me, it sounds simple. It is not simple. Try it in your organization at the leadership level, right? So especially if you want to do ERP or BPM or something initial, like a process improvement initiative like that. So where you take all the leaders in the organization and say, okay, tell me which are your processes, just name the processes for me, right? And define core and supporting. That exercise itself, I mean, takes me about 2 weeks, can take you more than that. But coming to the point, as I'm listing those 150, 70, whatever processes, in there, I'm saying, who's your process owner? And I need that senior lead. And I need one process owner, not two, not three. And that's where the kind of rubber hits the road. And as they do that, my next question, coming to the point, the way you make a process owner successful is two ways. You form a process council, which I'll discuss shortly, but you also identify the BPM. I call it the BPM champion, rather than saying somebody who's documenting the process. This BPM champion is typically this, subject matter expert. Now, this is again where the challenge becomes. Not everybody likes to, take away time from their day job and focus on Visio and documentation, but there are more people than not who like change, who like documentation, who like process, once they understand how to use Visio. And there are certain, personality traits which I've figured out over time that you need in a BPM champion. But essentially, a BPM champion is not someone at the senior level, not somebody too junior also, but somebody who's familiar with the work. Now, that person doesn't need to be 100% familiar with the work, right? That person needs to know enough, 50, 60%. So that is a person that we would train on BPM, and that is a person. So in my inventory log in Excel, I would have the process name, process owner, and then the BPM champion assigned to that process owner, right? And to make the process owner successful, the BPM champion is helping him or her document the process, make the process changes, quarterly reviews, whatever, and to help the process owner. I don't want to use the for fight for the change, but at times you got to fight for that change in the organization. If the other VP or other director is not open to making change or putting out that budget to make that change in the overall end-to-end process for the benefit of the organization, that's where the process owner brings it to the process council. So the process council or the process board is made up of the process owners. So if you think about what I'm saying, those process owners are senior people in the organization, and across 70 to 150 processes, they will not be 50. They will be anywhere from 5 to 8 to 10 max. And I would always encourage the clients to have this process council meeting, if not once a month, then at least once a quarter. Because if you're doing it once a year, you killed it. You're not getting together. I hope that helps. There's a lot more than what I just said, but I hope that helps.
Thanks. I also have a wonderful question here from Tina. When there is a process across several work functions or divisions, how do you identify that one process owner?
Excellent question, Tina. You facilitate. I facilitate. That's what I do. And this is where that's a great question. So if this is where if you're working with a if your sponsor for that initiative is a junior director or somebody who doesn't have influence, it will never take off. Now you can try, but it will never take off. This is where I work with, and I work with clients where the CEO is actively passionate. He wants to do it. And that's where I see it. My life becomes so easy. I'm being very candid with you, versus a client where either the executive I'm working with is not as passionate, doesn't get it, or it's one of those check the box off kind of initiatives, or I'm working with somebody who's a little junior in the organization, and every time he or she has to go up, there's a problem. But that's the honest answer. I don't know if that makes sense, Chanel. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, it from my experience, it can be challenging, but I guess this is where you sort of your buy-in from your C-suite sort of takes the rein in saying, listen, right, it will be owned by X function or division with the support from the other cross functions. So I think that's a discussion again for whoever's documenting to highlight that as sort of a control aspect, if it makes sense when you're assessing the process in identifying that right now there isn't one functional owner. So this is something that you can bring up to your C-suite level or management for the sign-off and review process. I mean, that's what I used to do before. I still do that. In some organizations, from my experience, they really haven't gotten the reins correct in terms of the process reviews and the functional owner concepts as we would understand from our level. But from our side, we also have to have that responsibility of engaging in the conversation with either a C-suite or someone at management to agree on taking that on as an ownership for the process review.
Yeah. And I will definitely, that's a good discussion. I'll definitely try and make it, explain more of this in a separate session. But just to close on this topic, you got to also see it from the leadership's point of view, right? For that executive leader, the C-suite or one notch down, the VP level, for them to really buy into what you're doing, understand they're also fighting day-to-day fires, if that makes sense to you. Like there's day-to-day work going on, there's that ERP implementation, there's another fire that just came out of regulatory group, or something went wrong in the field. Like there's constantly fires, and there's only so many best people you have in the organization, if you know what I'm saying, like knowledge, that guy or gal who just knows everything, right? There are only so few, and they're always the one who are on all the major projects, all the major initiatives, doing a fantastic day job. You know what I'm trying to say? So as an executive, you are under pressure to figure out, should I give that resource or my tier 2 resource to this BPM initiative or my ERP project or that M&A deal or like day-to-day job? So that's the challenge. And that's where as a project manager, for lack of a better word, who's trying to implement BPM across an organization, you've got to be mindful of that and kind of work with the leadership peer group, work with the one notch down, all the way down to the shop floor. And that's where, as you engage those subject matter, I'm telling you, this is where a lot of passion comes out in these workshops, right, Chanel? A lot of people have never had an opportunity to be in a workshop like this where, yeah, we have fun, we laugh, but at the same time, they see their process being mapped out, they see the process risks being identified, they see the key controls coming out. And it's a great opportunity for them finally to tell the leadership, this is what I do.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So long-winded answer to a simple question, how do you engage the leadership? But those are tips and tricks, essentially ways in which you demonstrate value. Otherwise, you won't get leadership's attention. So I hope that kind of helped to answer a little bit of what you were asking. Maybe in the future, I'll kind of think it through a little bit more structured and try and answer. Okay, so if there are more questions.
Some Deb and Tina have asked for us to elaborate on that a little bit more in the future session. So they were really great questions, and I really loved yours, Tina, because that was some of the problems that I used to have when I first started mapping out and looking for sign-off. So definitely something we can look into in the future.
Like I'm working with a client right now, and of course I can't name that we started BPM in 2022. They didn't have any process maps. They had what they call races on Excel. We identified 40 in 2022, built a structure for them, the framework for them. And then I left, I taught them, right? And they continued that the BPM Champions process owners. And now they have like 65 or 64 process maps documented, improvements identified, risks and controls. I mean, they're a little weak, we're working on that. But the best part about this is because they started early, now they're going through a new ERP implementation. And guess what? A lot of that work that is done in the first 6 months with the vendor who's coming up with the software and is more focused on the software versus how a business should be designed, that is already done.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of BPM, right? When you have taken the time, thought it through, mapped it out, identified improvements, identified the future state, the controls. So now when a vendor, whether it's an ERP or some system implementation or whatnot, we can say, here you go, That doesn't mean you will not have design workshops. That doesn't mean you will not open up those process maps and still tweak it to the SAP or the Oracle or whatever you're implementing. It doesn't mean that. But you have a great starting point. And what it also means is once a project is done, once the ERP project is done, you can take the improved process maps and keep continuing and improving your processes if that helps. Okay, so what I'm going to do next in the next 5 or 10 minutes quickly is, so I have a process map ready, right? I've got the explanations ready. That's pretty much it. And I've got the controls ready if you can kind of think about it. I would just simply take the explanation numbers like that, right? To my process map, paste it there, right? And just stick it in. Now, in this case, the font size is 12 and all. I will make this a little bit smaller. So it kind of, absorbs nicely. For the explanations in squares, I'll choose 0.2. It kind of fits nicely, right? And that's what I would do. I would cross-refer it here. I would cross-refer it there, right? I'm going a little fast now, just mindful of time. Take the line off. I'll call it 3. I'll call this 4, so on and so forth. Now remember, these are not step numbers. I'm referring to the explanation, if that makes sense. Chanel, does it make sense what I'm saying? So I'm referring these, right? And the reason I do that, I don't know, some people find it really like they have an aha moment, because when I go and look some of these processes that clients have documented, if you look at the process map, it's so verbose. There's so much going on they put explanations in the process map, right? Confusing. You keep it simple, high level, verb noun format in the right swim lane. No need to repeat the word business. No need to repeat the word EP analyst or vendor in the process step, because that is in your swim lane, right? And then in your explanation like this, explain what it is. Now, the final touch is the controls. Again, the controls, I wouldn't document directly. I would go through the process risk and control assessment framework that I taught in the last class in February, right? But from that Excel, once I figure out the controls are, I'll put on the Visio, and then I would go on the process map pretty much like that. And again, I would do the same thing. I would take it one notch down, unbold it, put it into the right 0.2 automatically up, good. And I would say, here's your control. Now, you may not necessarily have a control in each step, of course. Neither are you supposed. There's nothing like supposed to, but that's the other thing. I'm not supposed to have an explanation. I'm not supposed to have a control on each step. In fact, I rarely do. For the purpose of the exercise I showed you, but it would look up something like this. So you've got your process steps tied up, swim lanes, explanations, controls. And then I would take this to a workshop, brainstorm. I would typically work with one subject matter expert just to get started. And the reason I only do that is because if there are 3 people, good luck now. Try and find calendar time on all 3. Right now you're struggling. I'm wasting more time trying to find time with 3 people, whereas 1 is good enough. So what I typically tell my clients is, give me one subject matter expert who may know just 60%. It's enough. With that 60%, I created like a template, like a skeleton, get started, and then we'll start engaging more. And then with a big workshop, we'll put everybody and validate the process flow. Now, before that big workshop, what I would do is I would put the process step number. So for the process step number, simply go in the rectangle up here. So I would do it something like this, like that. I would put a font like this. I would left align it like that. I would still give me 1 second. Right? I would expand this a little bit more. Right? I would type, let's say 1 point like this, and then copy it a couple of times if that makes sense, like that, right? Like that, right? And then I would just type in. I know it takes a little time as you get used to it. It'll be much quicker and faster. I'm just going to do 4 for now in the interest of time, right? And then I would just remove the box around it or the line around it. I don't need the line anymore, right? And then I would stick it on the left, pretty much. That's what I would do. Like that, step 1.2, 1.3, like that. And as I said, don't confuse the explanation number with the step number. That is just an explanation number, right? So step number is a step number, something like that. And the reason the step number is helpful, especially in the big workshop that I'm having in 50 people, or not 50, but 10 to 12 people online or in person, this is how I tell the story. This is storytelling. Like at the end of the day, you met with the subject matter expert, you put the steps together, you put the explanation. At the end of the day, when I'm doing a presentation, it's no different than a PowerPoint, it's a storytelling. So the way I do, so you might do it differently. You might say, no, from here, I don't want to go 1.4, I want to go 1.4. It's your choice. It's how you want to tell the story. So however you want to tell the story, you write your step numbers. So that's easier for you to remember in front of 15 people, number 1, and number 2, it's easier for them to also follow versus you always going, you see my mouse moving here, you see my mouse moving there. You can quickly say I'm referring to step number 1.2 and now I'm going to 1.3 and there's 1.4. It's easier to say. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. I think this was a good 1-hour session. If there's any more questions, I'm more than happy to take it.
Yes, Meherban, I've got another question from Samdev. It's in your experience, what would be a good system for sorting work instructions or procedures for each process?
For storing work instructions, procedures.
Yeah, for storing.
So there are a couple of, okay, so to write the instructions, I would use the explanations, but then there are detailed manuals. I think that's what you're referring to, Sandeep, right? There are regulatory manuals, engineering manuals, standard operating, procedures, company policy, etc. So remember, the goal of the process map is not to create another SOP or another policy, or the goal is just to show it visually, connect the dots visually, right? And reference the relevant clause number. In some cases, I'll take the key 7 words or 10 words or maybe like a sentence from that and put it there just where I feel it's relevant. So that's what I would do. Now, the other part of your question, where do I store? Well, SharePoint, right? So you have your portals, company portals, SharePoint. That's where you would store. Now, the other thing, what I'm learning and more going towards, it's BPM software. Like I'm not there yet. I've been doing it for 20 years in Visio and it works fine. But remember, Visio, end of the day, is a static tool, right? So when you document those 150 processes, what you've done is, from not having a process map, from not having a structure, from having it in Bob and Susan's head, you put it on paper. And not just have you put it on paper, of course, as part of that workshop and collaborating with leadership, you streamline the process. You streamline, you improved, you put the controls in, all that is great. But what you've done in the day is you've taken those 150 processes and put it on Visio. And then you've taken the Visio and you PDF'd it, correct? It's static. Where we're going with AI, which is the really interesting piece of this AI or BPM tools, is you can take these Visios and you can just pull it into the BPM software. Now what you've done is the software is intelligent, right? Now what you've done is you told the software that the accounts payable performs these 4 steps on this process X. But guess what? The accounts payable analyst also performs those 5 steps on process Y. Those 10, you see where I'm going? So from process AP analyst to VP of finance to IT guy to logistics to operations, your entire company. So now that software knows each role, each step, each risk, each control. Think about what I'm saying. That you can tie into the day with the strategic objectives and your enterprise risk management, your enterprise risks, and your strategic goals, right? Again, that helps you with RPA, of course. But once you're done with RPA, so let's say there are 150 processes of which you implemented 50 RPAs as an example, 50. There will be certain processes left that you haven't RPA'd. That's where you can use the AI feature in the BPM software to actually tell you those decision boxes. How much further can you automate? I know I'm kind of going a lot into more detail to a simple question that some asked there, but presently what we use is SharePoint and Teams folder and shared drive. But down the road where we should be going, where some organizations are heading, is the BPM software. So there are certain softwares I'm looking into, but again, there are a dime a dozen, right? Be mindful of, for an organization that has not documented a process at all, if you take them straight down that lane, it might be a little too much. I think the step 1 is to kind of build that culture, for some of the earlier questions, how do you get the executive sponsor involved? How do you get the organization involved? So if you go right away into software, I feel at times it might scare them, for lack of a better way of explaining. You got to take it 1 step at a time. So, but it depends on the size of the organization, on the readiness of the organization, on the willingness of the leadership team. A lot of factors come into play.
Yeah, Bob, I got another question from Tina, and I think this is really hilarious but funny, but very good question is, it's the chicken or the egg situation. SOP first or map first?
Great question. And the straight answer is it depends, right? It depends. I'm always biased, of course. I will always say process map first, but I cannot undermine the value of a well-documented SOP, a well-documented manual that is required by law at times, that is required by, I don't know, a regulatory group, right? So they serve different purposes, if that makes sense. Right? It serves different purposes. SOP is a very comprehensive, detailed, step-by-step procedure at times, and process map is not supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be higher level.
I always like to say the details are in the description, not in the map.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions? So thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys asking the questions. The questions is what makes it interesting. And Chanel, I can't thank you enough for co-hosting, and maybe we should keep doing this in the future.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you everybody for your patience and all these wonderful questions. Sometimes you forget that these questions need to be answered to be able to get your work done, and you get so caught up in the many years of experience of doing it. It's a nice refresher. So thank you, Meherban.
My pleasure. Okay, guys, I think we'll end here. Thank you all for coming. And yeah, so this has been recorded and give me over the weekend. I say over the weekend, but it might be like next week. I'll put it on my YouTube channel and I'll set up the link to all of you then. Chanel, thank you once again very much.
Thank you all. Thanks, Meherban. You guys all have a wonderful evening where you're from. Day where I'm at in the Pacific.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.